Hey amazing sculptors, I'm going to create this video for you guys on how to mix colors using acrylic paint. So before we get started, I want you to make sure that you have the following supplies set up. So make sure that you have all of your acrylic paints, which are these little tiny containers that have red, yellow, and blue, also black and white. Make sure that you've taken the seal off of these and done that before you get started. Also, make sure that you have a scrap piece of paper. Right now, this is actually half of a piece of sketchbook paper. So you can take a piece of paper, fold it in half, use a little white half sheet. This could be printer paper. Half sheet should be more than fine for this exercise. Make sure you have a container of water with whatever paintbrush I gave you in your art kit. So this was the one that was in the art kit that I grabbed. Your paintbrush may look a little bit different than mine. You also have this type of paintbrush, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. This is just a foam brush. You will need a pencil, your plastic paint palette, and you will also need a paper towel, napkin, piece of toilet paper, something that you can use to blot off after you rinse your paintbrush in your water, okay? Now, a couple of things before we get started. I have here just a, pencil sharpener here. Find something that is like roughly this size. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the shape. What I like about this is small. I can trace around it. Another thing that would be perfect is like, for example, I have here just on my desk these like little tiny sticky notes. This would be perfect to trace around. If you have like a quarter laying around, you could trace around that, but something that's small, that's a size that you can trace multiple times on this sheet of paper. I'll share with you how to get your paper set up in just a moment, okay? So the goal for this particular exercise is we are going to talk a little bit about the color wheel and how to mix colors to match colors on the color wheel. Now, I do realize that this is a sculpture class. It's not a painting class. It's not your typical, two-dimensional art class. But we do need to know a little bit about color theory in order to mix our colors and match the ones that will be for your paper mache sculpture. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to mix colors, a little bit about color theory, a little bit about this type of paint, why we're using it, brush handling, and all that. Now, before we get started with any of that stuff, I just want to share with you real quick about this type of paint. So right now I have given you guys, I think 5 different apple barrel paints. These are acrylic paints. These are really, really cheap, very thin acrylic paints that you can get at Walmart or Target. Most of the time they run under $1 a piece. And I find that I use these for a lot of different reasons. But these are very versatile. You can use them for just a variety of different artistic purposes. The reason why I want to take a moment and talk about this type of paint that I've given you is I bought this for a specific reason. Acrylic paint is permanent. Okay, so what that means is if you get it on your hands, it will wash off, no problem. If you get it on your clothes, it may not come out. Okay, so you may want to like take a moment, roll up your sleeves. Okay, maybe if you're working on like your kitchen table, you might want to put a piece of newspaper down just to make cleanup a little bit easier. If you let the acrylic paint dry in your paintbrush, it will ruin the bristles. Okay, so keep that in mind when preparing your workspace. In fact, I think before I even get started here, I'm just going to put this piece of notebook paper down underneath my paper I'm working on just to kind of prep my workspace. And again, notebook paper, piece of newspaper, whatever. Obviously, if it gets on your skin, will wash off. But just be mindful of this. You don't want to mess around with this, get it all over your kitchen table, all over your carpet, and leave this to dry in the brush because it will not come out. Okay, so that's just kind of random note about acrylic paint. So use it, but use it appropriately, and also use it sparingly, because these bottles are not very large and we do have to mix paints to cover your entire paper mache sculpture, along with a couple other projects we're going to be using. Okay, so that's the stuffs about the acrylic paint. Now, the next thing I want you to go ahead and do is, and I think, let me see if I can zoom in real quick. Can I zoomy? Yes, I can. Wow, fancy times here. Okay, so what I have on my paper, and I would encourage you to set yours up the same, is, again, half sheet of just, you know, plain, it can be drawing paper, it could be printer paper, whatever. What I've done is I've taken my little thing that I'm going to trace around, and for me, I just did my pencil sharpener. Again, you can use a quarter, you can use just a shape that's small. And I did 3 rows of 3. Okay, so I traced it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and what I have done here, and I want you to set your paper up the same, is under this first one, label it yellow, orange. This one, orange. This one, red, orange. Then these rows are going to be your violets. So blue violet, just regular old violet, followed by red violet. And then the last row, you have your greens. So yellow green, green, and blue green. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment and actually do this real quick. These are my oranges. Sorry if you can't read my handwriting. These are my violets. And these are my greens. Okay. And when I purchased paint for you guys before the school year even started, I was trying to spend our supply money wisely, and I thought, okay, well, these kids need paint and we need permanent paint, you know, what can I give them? And then I realized, you know what, all we really need is our 3 primary colors, okay? And we can mix all of these other colors that are listed from these 3 primary colors, okay? So let's kind of talk color wheel stuff for just a moment. I don't have an physical example to show you, but you will have an example of a color wheel on the slideshow. And basically what I have given you here is the 3 primary colors off of the color wheel. So yellow, red, and blue are our 3 primary colors. These 3 colors exist pure in nature. You can't mix any colors together to get these colors. And the color wheel shows us all of the possible color combinations we can arrive at with mixing these together in different combinations, okay? So all of these other colors that are listed on our page, from our oranges to all of our violets to our greens, we can actually mix those just by doing these 3 colors in different combinations, okay? The black and the white we will talk about, I think, in the next video. So once you have this here, we are going to start to set up our paint palette. Okay, so this plastic thing here is your paint palette. What we're going to do is, for our oranges, in order to mix any of these oranges, you would mix primary yellow and primary red in different combinations to get orange, which is a secondary color. Anytime you combine 2 primaries together, you get what's called a secondary color. So if I mix yellow and red together, I'm gonna get secondary orange, okay? For this row here, for my violets, if I mix primary red and primary blue together in different combinations, I get all of my violets. So I get secondary violet by combining primary red and primary blue, secondary violet. And then last but not least, for my greens down here, in order to get all of these different types of greens, I'm going to mix primary yellow and primary blue in different amounts to equal any of these secondary greens. Okay, so anytime I'm mixing 2 primaries together, I'm going to get a secondary color, which is orange, violet, and these greens here. Okay. So we are going to do that on our paint palette. Now the goal with doing this, and I'm actually going to move this over here in just a second. The goal with doing this is we want to use our paint sparingly, because you need a lot of it to create colors for your armature, right? So we're going to be painting our paper mache sculpture. We need a lot of paint to cover that. So we want to use just a small amount of paint within our paint palette for this exercise. We don't need a whole lot. So how can we do that? How can we really use our paint wisely here? So to start with our oranges, we are going to start with yellow in our crater and add small amounts of red to the yellow. For this one, we're going to have a 50-50 split between red and blue. I'll explain why in a moment. And then for this last one, which is all of our greens, we're going to use yellow to start and add blue in. Okay, so I have these notes on the side. You might want to write these down on your paper as well, and I will remind you of them as we go along. Okay, so to start with our orange, what I'm going to go ahead and mixing our oranges, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use yellow as my base, and I'm going to squirt out the smallest amount, and I'm talking like smaller than a dime size. Okay, so just that is all I need for that. And what I'm going to do here in my second crater is I'm going to do another dime size amount of yellow. And in this last crater, I am going to try the best that I can to do the smallest amount of red. Okay. And then do the smallest, an equal amount in the same crater of the blue. So I'm going to try and match that glob with this. That might be a little bit blue heavy, but I'll come back to that. Now down here, what I want you guys to go ahead and do is underneath this first one, go ahead and put a small dime size glob of red. And underneath the second one, I'm going to put a dime size amount of blue. And this last one I'm going to leave open, and I'm going to fill this with what I need for a little bit later on. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do here is we made all of these like little globs really small because we don't want to waste our paint. And I set up our paint palette for this specific reason. We are going to use our paintbrush, the small one here, okay, whatever the smallest one in your art kit is. And what we're going to do is we are going to use small amounts of a different color and add it to our base color, okay? So for our oranges, our base color is yellow. So I'm going to start with this yellow. And just by adding small amounts of red, very thoughtfully, if I add a little bit of red to my yellow, I should end up at yellow-orange. If I add a little bit more red to this crater, I should arrive at orange. And if I add even more red to this exact same crater, I should wind up with red-orange, okay? And your goal with this is to try and add your darker color gradually to your lighter color, okay? So we're starting with our lighter color as the base and gradually adding our darker color so that we can control the color we're mixing so that we can match the color wheel on our screen. Okay, so control and color matching is our goal here. So I'm going to just dip the smallest amount of my brush into the red, and I'm going to mix it into this crater thoroughly. Now, I'm looking at the color wheel that's on my screen right now, and even though, yes, this is a yellow-orange, at this point in time, it doesn't match my screen, so I'm going to rinse my paintbrush, blot it onto my paper towel, and go back for a little bit more. Just another small smidgen of color. A smidgen is a small amount of something, just FYI. All right, so now looking at my screen, I have a very nice yellow-orange color. It seems to match. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that thoughtfully to my paper here. Okay, and when you hold your paintbrush, and I don't like this paintbrush that I'm using, I don't normally use a paintbrush like this, make sure that you hold it in the land where metal meets wood right here, and you'll have control over where that paint goes. Try and stay inside the lines as best you can. That'll be good practice for your armature. Okay, rinsing, blotting, and in this exact same crater, I'm going to try and transform this into orange, okay? So what I'm going to do is grab another smidgen of red, and start mixing it in here and see if I can arrive at secondary orange. Sorry, I'm being lazy and not rinsing my paintbrush between things. I apologize. I just don't want this to be a 20-minute video. All right, it looks like, wow, it looks like I have secondary orange there. Matching it to my color wheel, looks like it matches. I'm going to go ahead and apply it. And then last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and again, holding my paintbrush by my metal part, metal meets wood. Okay, for my last one, my red orange, coming back here, adding another smidgen to this exact same crater. Checking it against my color wheel, mixing it thoroughly, checking it against my color wheel. And it looks like I'm almost at red orange. There we go. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and apply it. Now, what happens if you do that small amount, that smidgen of red into the yellow, and oops, it's the wrong color? Okay, what you can do is add a little bit more yellow to your crater to lighten it. Just don't be surprised if it takes twice the amount to lighten it. Okay, so you can go back if you make a mistake. It's just a little bit harder. But see how I was able to conserve that paint, and I only used a small amount, and I was able to create 3 different oranges with that paint, those 2 colors, by adding small amounts of the darker color to the lighter color. Boom, done and done. Craftsmanship looks decent. Okay, so go ahead and rinse. I'm going to go ahead and rinse and blot. And I'm actually going to go ahead with the second one. So I'm going to do the greens here. The greens are actually further down on my page. I'm going to do violets last because I find them the trickiest. So for my greens, what I'm going to go ahead and do is use my yellow as the base, and I'm going to add little amounts of this blue to the yellow. Okay, so I'm just going to, smallest smidgen, smallest amount of blue, mixing it in. That was a little too small. Rinsing. I'm going to blot. Aha, now we're starting to get a change. Getting lazy here. Okay, it looks like I have my yellow green. All right, so remember this part is down here. I'm doing this one next. Nice. Holding my paintbrush in the land where metal meets wood. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and go to my secondary green. And I'm going to add just a little bit more blue to this crater. Again, if you accidentally go too dark from the beginning, you can go ahead and bring it back. Backtrack by adding a little bit more of the yellow. Okay. This secondary green could be a little bit darker. Sorry, I'm ruining my paint here. I'm just getting impatient. All right. This is more at secondary green. And then my last one is actually a blue-green. So I'm going to add a lot more blue in to turn this from yellow-green to green to blue-green. So I'm going to actually scoop up all of this. All right, and that's turning over nicely. Again, trying to match the color on the screen. This could actually use a little bit more blue, but I'm not going to waste our time. All right, holding the brush by Land Where Metal Meets Wood. All right, the hardest one that I've saved for last is our secondary violet, okay? So for this one, I tried to do equal amounts of red and blue in the crater first, and we're gonna plop that one there. And then what we're gonna try and do is swing it either way. So if we want to turn this to red violet, we'll add more red to it. If we want to turn it to blue violet, we will add a little bit more blue. Right now, this is reading as red violet, so it has a little bit more red in it. And so it matches the red violet. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in where it says red violet, which is right here. In order to make this violet and then blue violet, all I have to do is add a little bit more blue to it. Okay, so I'm going to let my paintbrush sit in there. I'm going to actually add it directly here. Okay, rinse my paintbrush. If your water looks kind of like throw up like mine does, please take the time to like dump it and, you know, refresh it. Otherwise, I think it affected my greens down here actually. All right, mixing this together. Ooh, this is looking really nice. This is actually looking like a violet to me. And then I'm going to swing it to my violet by adding even more blue. Okay. If it says blue in the name, that means you're going to add more blue to that color that you're mixing. If it says red in the name, you're going to add a little bit more red to the color you're mixing. And again, add it little bits at a time so you can control the color. All right, so violet, and then the last one I have is blue violet. So guess what I'm going to do? Add a little bit more blue. Smallest amount I can. Boom. And there we go. Nice. Okay, blue violet. Mixing on that. Nice. Okay, so a little bit more. The blue violet that I'm trying to match is actually a little bit more blue than this, so I would actually add more blue to the crater before I apply it, but right now I'm getting tired of making this video. So right now you can see how I was able to mix all of these other colors off of the color wheel, my secondaries, and also different versions of my secondaries, which these are actually called tertiary colors, but all from different amounts of each of these three primary colors. I was able to achieve these 9 different colors that are here, okay? So give it a shot. Use the least amount of paint possible. Start with your lightest color as the base. Remember, if you're doing your oranges, have about a dime size amount of yellow. Add smidgens of red to the yellow to kind of convert it from one to the other. If you accidentally make it too dark, backtrack and add a little bit more yellow in. For your greens, again, use yellow as the base and add little amounts of blue to get all of these. If you make it too dark too quickly, just add some more yellow back in. And then for your violets, violets are the trickiest because really a true violet is about a 50-50 split between red and blue. So if you wind up with, you know, one right away, kind of like I did here, you can go back and just plop it where it goes. And then in order to bring it to violet to blue violet, I just added little amounts of blue to swing it back this way. Okay. Don't forget, as soon as you're done this exercise, you will upload it to Schoology. I do need you to rinse your water cup. I need you to use soap to wash out your paintbrush. I do need you to really, really clean out this palette completely, because if this dries in your paint palette, it is permanent. It's very hard to get out. So do all that cleanup for me.